It's Sunday morning. 37-year-old Simone Ashford is sitting on her couch, 4 days after her mother's death. She's scrolling through her phone in the dark, caught in the aimless drift that often follows a major loss. Then a listing stops her. It's her mother's house on Sycamore Lane. The photos show the garden and the porch where her mother sat every evening. Across the main image is a banner, sold, 4-bedroom family home. The house had never been listed. Her brother Marcus hadn't mentioned it in a single phone call or text message. He hadn't brought it up when they spoke after the funeral. Losing a childhood home is a heavy blow. Finding out your own brother sold it while you were standing at your mother's grave changes the nature of that loss entirely. Ruth Ashford's health declined over 18 months. It was a slow, incremental struggle with heart failure, a period that turned every ordinary visit into a possible final goodbye. During those 18 months, Simone was there every weekend. She drove 40 minutes to handle the groceries, manage medical appointments, and sit with her mother on the porch. Marcus lived only 20 minutes away, but he rarely visited. He was busy with his business and his own family, maintaining a schedule that he used to justify his absence. Simone accepted his reasoning. She believed they were handling their mother's illness in their own ways, and she trusted that they were on the same page regarding their mother's future. While Simone was focused on her mother's care, Marcus's absence gave him the space to begin negotiations for the house, unwatched and unquestioned. To understand the extent of the planning, we have to look at the timeline. It begins on Wednesday, the day Ruth Ashford passed away. By Saturday, the day of the funeral, the siblings are on 2 completely different paths. On the bottom path, Simone is at the graveside. She is holding her mother's favorite flowers and promising to take care of everything. On the top path, Marcus is 40 minutes away from the burial site. While his sister is at the cemetery, Marcus is signing the final closing papers on the family home. When Simone saw the listing the next morning and called, Marcus answered on the 3rd ring. He didn't offer an apology. His first words were, "I was going to tell you." But you don't sign closing papers on a Saturday unless you spent the previous weeks coordinating the sale. The timeline shows that Marcus was liquidating the estate while his mother was still alive. 2 weeks after the funeral, the will was read. It was a direct, uncomplicated document. The instructions were clear. The house on Sycamore Lane was to be divided equally between the 2 children. It could only be sold if both parties agreed. At the lawyer's table, Marcus admitted he had already secured a buyer. He argued that the offer was too high to ignore, effectively dismissing the mutual consent clause entirely. He had initiated the paperwork 3 weeks before Ruth died. Marcus attempted to frame the secret sale as a logical financial move based on the strength of the housing market. The meeting confirmed that Marcus had prioritized a market opportunity over his mother's final, legally binding instructions. The trust Simone maintained throughout her mother's illness has reached its limit. She is now replacing family loyalty with legal protection. She hired attorney Patricia Vance to compare the timeline of the sale against the terms of the will. The legal conclusion was straightforward. Selling property that is jointly owned without the consent of the other owner is a direct violation of the estate's terms. By involving an attorney, Simone shifted the conflict from a family dispute into a matter of illegal conduct. Simone realized that I was going to tell you wasn't an explanation, it was an admission of a choice. That realization ended her sense of obligation toward her brother. Marcus's choice to prioritize the market over his family's mourning ended any chance of reconciliation. When a family member chooses opportunism over honesty, the only way to respect their memory is to enforce the boundaries they left behind. While a family gathers to say goodbye, a pen moves across a legal document on the other side of town. A son, acting as an executor, signs away his mother's home of 31 years to a commercial developer. His sister is standing at the grave, focusing on the logistics of mourning. She is unaware that the property her mother intended for both children is being liquidated without her consent. Real estate transactions are built for speed. Documents are drafted and funds are wired, often within days. Grief requires a different timeline, stretching single hours into long months. When an unauthorized sale happens, it creates a legal vacuum. A signed deed acts like a moving train. Suddenly, a childhood home is listed online as move-in ready, and a lifetime of residence is overwritten by a market listing. Stopping this process requires pulling a legal emergency brake. These filings act as a necessary friction, pausing a commercial transaction to protect a family's fundamental right to participate in the disposal of their own history. The first defense against a rogue executor is a formal legal challenge. Within 48 hours of learning about the sale, the sister's attorney files an injunction to freeze the title. Property law is built on consent. It is strictly illegal to sell a jointly owned asset without the explicit, documented agreement of every person named on the title. After a death, assets enter probate, a mandatory period where a court validates the will and settles debts. The house cannot be legally transferred until this lock is removed. The brothers' early sale bypassed this required sequence, directly violating the instructions in his mother's will. The filing has immediate physical consequences. The developer's renovation plans stop. Construction crews are turned away because the property title is no longer considered clean. Property law acts as a procedural safety net. When familial trust fails, these rigid rules step in to dictate conduct through court orders rather than conversation. The developer, William Chen, initially purchased the house under the impression that the executor had the sole authority to sell. There is a legal distinction between a good faith purchase and one based on a misled transaction. If a buyer believes they are dealing with the rightful sole owner, they have certain protections. By notifying the developer of the sister's claim, her lawyer officially poisons the transaction. The developer can no longer claim ignorance of the dispute. This creates a 4-month standoff. The house remains trapped in a legal holding pattern while the lawyers negotiate. In early phone calls, the brother was dismissive, insisting the sale was a simple mistake. But as the months pass, the mounting legal costs and the threat of a court-ordered reversal turn that dismissal into financial fear. The methodical pace of the legal system is often viewed as a flaw. In this case, the slow speed is the tool. It creates a pressure cooker that eventually forces the offending party to negotiate a settlement. 4 months of sustained legal pressure leads to a breakthrough. A formal settlement is reached on a Thursday afternoon. The sister secures the full financial restitution required by the will, 50% of the sale proceeds, along with compensation for the legal fees she incurred while fighting the sale. She also demanded a specific, non-financial term, a 2-week window of unrestricted access to the house. She is legally granted the time to be inside the property before any renovations begin. After reviewing the legal filings and the history of the property, the developer agrees to adjust his landscaping plans. He instructs his team to try and incorporate the existing rose garden into the new design. In October, the sister returns to the house. The furniture is still in place. Her mother's morning coffee mug remains on the kitchen counter, exactly where it was left on the day of the funeral. She spends those 2 weeks walking through the rooms to collect the items that carry her family's history. A photo album, a specific painting, and the blankets from the chairs. These are the small things the developer would have cleared away. She stands on the porch one last time, looking at the roses her mother planted decades ago. The plants are still blooming, even in the October cold. She finishes her time there on her own terms. A legal challenge cannot unsell a home, but it provides the rigid structure needed to reclaim a sense of agency. It ensures that when a family finally walks away from a property, they do so with their inheritance and their memories intact.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a deeply personal yet surprisingly universal text called The Anatomy of a Resolution, unpacking the weight of truth and the open door. Think about it for a second. How well do we really know our own families until we're forced to navigate a true crisis together? We're going to explore a really profound story today. It's about family, the suffocating burden of grief, and the incredibly messy journey of finding closure after a bitter, heart-wrenching legal battle over an inheritance. This isn't just about the dry mechanics of the law. No, this is about the raw, human emotions that push us to our absolute limits when everything we thought we knew just falls apart.
Grief makes people do things they cannot fully explain. Wow. That quote is honestly the absolute anchor for everything we're about to discuss. Today's Explainer explores how we navigate betrayal when we are at our most vulnerable. I mean, it asks us to confront what happens when the exact people we expect to lean on are the ones who pull the rug right out from under us. And perhaps even more importantly, it forces us to look at what happens after the dust finally settles.
Section 1. The aftermath. So we're transitioning here from the heavy, chaotic reality of grief and legal warfare to something that's arguably even harder to navigate. The sudden silence that follows, and, the unexpected moment that silence is broken. Let's map out the aftermath real quick so we know exactly where we are in the story. First, we have the tragic passing of the narrator's mother. This devastating loss is followed almost immediately by the ultimate betrayal from their brother, Marcus, which then spirals into a bitter, dragged-out legal settlement. But here's the thing. The pivotal moment we're focusing on today doesn't happen in a brightly lit courtroom or some mediator's office. Nope. It happens right here at Step 4, exactly 6 months after the settlement was signed. It happens on a quiet Sunday afternoon with absolutely zero agenda. Just a simple phone call made when the lingering silence finally became heavier than whatever it would cost to break it.
So Marcus calls. And he doesn't call to talk about lawyers or money, right? He mentions he drove past the house they had fought so bitterly over. He casually brings up the renovations taking place. Funnily enough, renovations the narrator already knew about because someone named William Chen had been sending photos. But then Marcus says this. The garden is still there. She would have liked that. And in that exact moment, the narrator notes that Marcus's voice completely lost that carefully maintained defensive distance he'd had for the past year. Suddenly, without warning, he just sounded like the brother from childhood again.
They stayed on the line for 40 minutes. Now, they didn't magically fix everything in those 40 minutes because, let's be real, you simply can't fix a year of shattered trust in one single conversation. But they talked, they shared vivid memories of the front porch, the very particular fiery orange of the October leaves falling in the yard, and the specific way their mom held her favorite coffee mug. Leaning into these details reveals this powerful reminder of how ordinary things, when you've lost someone, turn out to be absolutely everything. So, the crucial point is, how do we actually make sense of the betrayal itself?
Section 2. The psychology of betrayal.
We shift now from the quiet events of that unexpected phone call to the raw underlying motivations behind Marcus's actions. At the end of that call, Marcus offers this startling confession. He says he should have just admitted he was terrified of what would happen to the family with their mother gone, that she was the true glue holding it all together. I did something stupid because I was scared, and I'm sorry. Let's just sit with that for a second. The immense emotional weight of admitting that a massive, life-altering betrayal didn't actually stem from calculated malice, but from pure, unadulterated fear. And this leads the narrator to a really profound, paradigm-shifting realization: the people who hurt us most are rarely monsters. Marcus wasn't some cartoon villain twisting his mustache, right? He was just a frightened man who made a terrible, impulsive decision in a moment of utter weakness. And then he compounded that initial mistake by hiding the truth, when the truth was the only thing that could have possibly helped. So often, we find that the people who betray us are just scared or greedy or deeply broken in a way they simply haven't dealt with yet.
Section 3. Accountability versus forgiveness.
But here is the absolutely critical distinction, and this brilliantly illustrates the core of the issue. Understanding someone's fear doesn't automatically excuse their actions. This sets up a vital framework for anyone trying to navigate a betrayal of this magnitude. We really have to internalize the difference between these two concepts. Forgiveness? Well, that's your choice. It's entirely about your own feelings and your own timeline for healing. But accountability? That is a requirement. It is strictly about consequences. The narrator points out that the legal process didn't provide some movie-style justice with a neat, tied-up ending. The law fundamentally doesn't care about feelings or intentions or someone's underlying fear. What it provided was accountability, the necessary formal acknowledgement that what happened was objectively wrong and that wrong things have concrete consequences. And, for the narrator, establishing that firm boundary was enough to leave the door open just a little bit.
Section 4. The anchor of ordinary things.
Let's see how this builds into the narrator's present day. We shift our focus to how they actually find lasting healing. It isn't in the physical real estate they spent a grueling year fighting over, not at all. It's in the memories they actively carry forward. 40 years, that's how long ago the narrator's mother bought a painting at a bustling street market. Today, that painting hangs safely in the narrator's apartment. There is just an incredible power in untethering a loved one's memory from the physical house that has already become something else and instead anchoring it into something portable. It's really about taking the objects that genuinely carry her spirit and securing them firmly in their current life where they can be appreciated every single day.
The physical items that ground the narrator are wonderfully simple. The coffee mug sits right there in the kitchen, ready to be used. The blanket is casually draped on the back of the chair, offering comfort. The photo albums are safe on the shelf, preserving the past. These physical items quietly ground the narrator in the present. But actually, scratch that. The most important item on this list isn't an object at all. It's ordinary Tuesdays. The narrator treats every single one as deeply precious, coming to the powerful, life-affirming realization that there is literally no such thing as an ordinary Tuesday. There are only Tuesdays, and you either consciously show up for them or you don't.
Section 5. The Universal Playbook.
While this is a deeply personal story, the author turns outward at the very end, speaking directly to anyone who might be going through their own legal or personal battle during a time of immense grief. The author issues a direct call to action, asking readers if you have ever lost someone and had your loss weaponized against you to take something that wasn't theirs. If you've had to fight for what was right at the exact moment when you had absolute zero energy left to fight, drop a fire emoji in the comments. I absolutely love this. It's an empowering, direct acknowledgement that this is not just one person's isolated story. It's a shared, tragically universal experience of having to stand your ground when you are at your absolute weakest.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the author leaves us with tactical, rapid-fire advice that serves as a literal playbook for survival. Keep the receipts, know your rights, trust the truth. Because honestly, the truth has a funny, persistent way of coming forward even when everything else is falling apart. The garden is still there, the roses are still there, and so are you. You just have to keep going, one step at a time.
So, we wrap up today's explainer with a pretty thought-provoking question for you all. When the worst happens, will you show up for your ordinary Tuesdays? It is a fundamental choice we all have to make when navigating the tangled web of grief and betrayal. You can let the battle consume you entirely, or you can choose to hold tightly onto the ordinary things that, in the end, turn out to be everything. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you on the next one.